pumpkins. It's always about pumpkins. I honestly hate pumpkins, for real, and they hate me back. Occasionally having to face them inevitably. On the occasion of a family dinner, or for example during Halloween. I have nothing against them, but I don't have a very good culinary relationship with them, you see. I never had actually, since childhood. Probably some childhood trauma, I suppose. I love pumpkin seeds though, they are delicious and a perfect quick snack. Additionally, they are rich in minerals, especially zinc, which is why even the World Health Organization recommends their daily consumption. But here we are not doing an honest review of my culinary preferences, I suppose, or about pumpkins, and I deviated a little from the main topic. On purpose somewhat. I thought it was a good introduction to our new review, and maybe you learned something new about pumpkin seeds. As a little bonus. Maybe we should focus our channel more on food reviews, wouldn't that be cool? Although there are enough people doing just that already online, I suppose, so maybe not the greatest idea. Backtracking to our main subject of the day, we have some bashing to do here, it seems. Some pumpkin bashing to be exact. We are of course talking about the Pumpkin Bash event launched during Halloween for World of Tanks. Not just randomly bashing some pumpkins out of pure boredom or pleasure. This was a special event that took place from October 20th through November 4th. An event full of magic and sorcery that promises to boil and bubble like a magical cauldron. Hopefully, it won't be us that will boil and bubble during this wonderful new game mode though. The game rules for this new mode are rather simple this time, because they are similar to what we have in random battles. To participate in the event you need a tank between tier 6 and 8, and plenty of pumpkin juice at your disposal. Just kidding, you only need said tanks. Battles take place in the classic players versus players format, with teams consisting of 15 players. The only difference is that the matchmaker will try to set up single-tier battles, which means that each tier will enter the battle only on its own tier. With a few small exceptions. If the matchmaker fails to make the games in a timely manner, you may also find yourself in other battle configurations, for example. You may even find yourself in another parallel universe, surrounded by more or less dubious figures. Just kidding, this part is made up by us, so ignore it, please. It's part of the script I received and I have no choice but to read it exactly as it is, for better or for worse. Otherwise my fabulous co-workers threaten me with some pumpkin pie for lunch. Which is not ideal considering what I said earlier about my intolerance to anything pumpkin related. But now that I'm safe and won't have to eat pumpkin pie for lunch, we can get back on track here with the general game rules. Fortunately, another rule is that wheeled vehicles will have separate battles during this event, regardless of their tier. That means we won't be seeing wheeled vehicles in the same fights alongside tanks, which is awesome. Whoever came up with this idea deserves a raise or a better position within the company, seriously. Maybe this could be implemented with great success in random battle as well, but I guess that's just wishful thinking. Realistically, it won't happen anytime soon, or maybe ever. They would rather take the artillery out of the game altogether than their wonderful wheeled vehicles. But what do we do with those who don't have wheeled vehicles and want to participate in this event, you may ask? Simple. Those who do not have wheeled vehicles in their garage will have a few available for rent. Although we must also mention here that on some occasions, you may have to wait in line a bit longer for the battle to start playing with these vehicles. Now that I've laid out all these aspects for you, I have just one small mention to make. This new event seems to have replaced, at least for the time being, the old and rusty Murney mode we were already used to around Halloween time. A very good thing in our opinion, perhaps even tremendously good. Because Murney had reached a catastrophic stage with multiple technical problems, and our honest review last year highlighted this perfectly. If we'll ever see Murney again, we don't know at the moment, and we don't want to know. Because we don't want to see that event ever again. The bitter taste left behind by our experience last year still lingers today, no matter how much lemonade we try to wash it down. But let's leave old Murney alone to rest, because we have more important and pleasant things to do here now. So say goodbye to Murney, and say hello to Pumpkin Bash. The time has come to start our honest bashing review, so here we go, I guess. Similar to our last review, we will approach this event as a free-to-play player. We won't invest a cent in buying different packs available, and we will focus fully on completing all the available missions in a reasonable amount of time, to see if we can get all the rewards without wasting our time and youth in front of a screen trying to get a pair of new pixels in a game. We'll have a few things to say about that later on, but luckily good things this time. Kind of unexpected, wouldn't you say? It took us by surprise too, but yes, there are some good things to mention here later. We'll just tell you this for now. Pumpkin Bash is something new, something pretty cool, and something pretty accessible to everyone. There is somewhat of a radical change in the way this event and its objectives have been thought out, as opposed to others released by Wargaming. But we don't want to give away too many secrets right off the bat, so you'll have to watch our full honest review, which we have carefully crafted just for you, our lovely viewers and subscribers. We have just one thing to add to the above before we begin, to clarify an important aspect from the start. Although we said that this event represents something new and cool, accessible and somewhat of a radical change, which is true, not everything is as it seems at first glance. This was somewhat expected, that's why we do these in-depth analyses here, after all, to catch what is not noticeable at first glance. And oh boy, we did catch some big and rotten problems here with this event. Some date back many years and have deep roots in the core game mechanics, which this wonderful new event fully uses so it can function and work properly. Although, working and functioning properly may be a bit much to say, at times. So please keep that in mind throughout the review. To kick things off, we could start with the rewards, I suppose. Because these are the most valuable and unique things we can get our hands on during this event, and somewhat of a first for the game even. We're talking about witches here, more specifically. You heard me right. Witches. And a cat. Let's not forget about the cat. As this is no ordinary cat we have here, make no mistake. It's a talking cat, if you can believe it. At this point, you might be wondering what in God's name we're talking about here. It doesn't seem to make any sense, does it? But I will try to clarify things a little here. We didn't go nuts, don't worry. It's just that things are a little different this time. A little more, actually. In fact, everything about this event is out of the ordinary, no matter what you might consider normal for this game. Seriously. That's because first of all the main rewards of Pumpkin Bash are for new female crew members, or rather I should say witches, and a talking cat. But these are not your typical type of witches who usually get on a broomstick and cast spells on poor old people, somewhere in an abandoned village in the middle of nowhere. And neither the cat, for that matter. These, along with the cat, are 5 unique crew members who climb into a tank and start wreaking havoc on the battlefield. Moreover, each crew member has their own unique voiceover, and you can even activate a special crew voiceover if you place all of them in the same tank, according to their qualifications. Which is completely new and will radically change the way your crew interacts and communicates during combat. Until now, the only member of the entire crew who spoke during a fight was the commander, but I'm sure you already know that. It's definitely something new to the game and a more than welcome addition from our point of view. It adds more variety and will definitely change the battle experience in your favorite tank. However, Keep in mind that to activate the special voices for each member you must place them in a tank with 5 crew positions, and each member has their own unique qualification that cannot be changed. So you must match them exactly as they are. It's worth noting here that this thing won't work if you spread members across multiple tanks. They must all be in the same tank to get the special voiceovers. That's why it's important to get the entire team, including the cat, lest we forget. Because when only the commander is present in a tank, a limited second option soundtrack will activate. And if you place any of the other crew members on other tanks, the voiceover for that member won't work. To make a quick summary of all unique crew members and their qualifications, we have Cordelia Astra as the commander, Sybil Brenhart in the gunner position, Aurelia von Alden as a loader, Deirdre Grimald for the driver, and the talking cat Cordamius as the radio operator. All 5 members of the team have the Coven as a 0 perk, which works exactly like Brothers in Arms but has some special arcane flair added to it, and each of them has enough experience to fully train a second perk or skill. A little low on experience for additional skills and perks we might say, but that's okay considering that this crew is unique I suppose.
This is a 10-minute mission. We're in, we win, we're out. Any questions? No questions. Then let's roll.
Ricochet? Seriously?
We've got fire in here, just to let you know.
The gun's fixed. Who's awesome? I'm awesome.
At a cat? Are you firing at a cat?
Just a little demo of the voices for each crew member, so you can get a better idea of what we have here to work with, and why they are so unique. Especially the cat's voice. That's definitely unique and it doesn't get any less weird than that, I promise you.
Okay, you go in, and I'll take a nap in the engine compartment.
Can you please stop interrupting me here? Act as a normal quiet kitty for just a moment for crying out loud. He has quite a colourful vocabulary under his belt, we might say, and he's a bit mischievous at times. But we'll leave it up to you to discover more. All in all, we certainly can't dispute that this crew is really special and will quickly find a warm place in one of your favourite tanks. We just hope that this trend with crews like this will continue on other events or occasions, because we think it's cool and a really good idea. We're just wondering why it wasn't implemented sooner, because this really should have been done years ago. We have been saying for some time that it was necessary and would greatly improve the game, and so have many others. This thing with the commander being the only crew member able to communicate has become monotonous and outdated, like many other aspects and mechanics of the game, for that matter. But let's be happy I suppose we finally got this. In the end, it seems they came to the same conclusion as us and it's a good start. A little late, but better late than never after all. To move on from this topic, let's talk about the progression stages you need to complete in order to get your crew members and some other rewards, because we also have other things we can get our hands on progressing through the stages. There are a total of 5 stages to complete, and each stage contains 2 missions. The first mission in a stage rewards you with bonds and some consumables. 200 bonds and 10 consumables to be exact. Here the most important rewards are bonds I suppose, and in total, you can collect 1000 if you progress through all the stages. Consumables are also welcome I guess, but nothing special in the end. To complete the first mission you must accumulate a total of 2000 Halloween points, which are calculated at the end of each battle based on the same rules as the amount of XP in random battles. In principle, it is not very difficult to accumulate them, and in a few fights, you are done here. This of course also depends on how good you were throughout the fight, but generally, from our observations, 2 or 3 fights are enough if you place in the upper half of the rankings. The second mission of each stage requires you to qualify in the top 7 players on the team based on Halloween points earned, with a small caveat though. You must qualify by strictly using a specific combat ability over several battles. Combat abilities like the magic shield, dash, recovery, fire shot, and decay. Each stage will require the use of such an ability and it changes from stage to stage. Finally, after completing the second mission you will be rewarded with one of the crew members, a special 2D style for each of them and some unique decals. As with the first mission, here too, the progress did not seem too cruel and to finish the mission, usually 4, maybe 6 games are needed. Depending on how you position yourself in the rankings. This would be the case, say, for a player with a win ratio of 45 or 50% on his account. Here we have a few mentions to make though. This is only possible of course because Wargaming has changed the rules of the game along the way since the event was launched. In the first phase when the event started, in order to be able to complete the second mission of a stage it was necessary to qualify in the top 7 players in the team no more and no less than 8 times. Doing a simple calculation, this would have meant that you would probably have needed at least 14 or 16 battles in order to complete the mission, which is a bit much. We've been playing since the first day of the event when we had to qualify 8 times and it took us 13 battles to complete the mission, and we kind of consider ourselves lucky to have achieved this feat so quickly. Especially taking into account the following aspect. For each of the 5 stages, you had 3 days to complete it, after which it would become unavailable and you would automatically advance to the next one, not giving the possibility to complete the previous stage if you haven't done it and receive its rewards. You had to resort to buying different packs if you wanted the crew member you couldn't get by completing the second mission. Which was just another monetization tactic after all. Kind of interesting, wouldn't you say? But they realized their mistakes and that the chosen path is not the right one in the end, and managed to wash away their sins somehow. For the moment at least, but we hope that this trend will continue. To understand what exactly they did in this regard, starting with the second stage, they simplified the second mission so that only 3 qualifications are needed, not 8 as before. Which made things much nicer and accessible to everyone. Additionally, they added a new mission that rewarded players who rank in the top 10 by Halloween points with 30,000 silver. Previously playing Pumpkin Bash mode you couldn't get silver, you could only lose because combat abilities cost you 3,000 silver each and you were kind of forced to buy them to participate in the event. Otherwise, you wouldn't even have been able to complete the second mission that rewarded you with a crew member, because you needed these abilities for that. So by participating in this you could only lose silver basically. We just wonder why this change of heart on their part. What could have happened to produce such a change on the fly? Because the change was quickly implemented almost immediately after the start of the event, starting with the second stage. In the end, we can only speculate on this topic, which we won't. It was a good move on their part though, we can appreciate that, and whoever thought and stepped in to make these adjustments did the right thing. Maybe there should be more like-minded people in the company. In any case, if this adjustment had not been made during the event and in a timely manner, we would have had reason to reduce a point from the final verdict of our honest review. But we don't seem to have a reason to do that because we think it was the right decision and it was quickly implemented in this case, which can only make us happy in the end. So no points down the drain, for now. Kind of surprising, wouldn't you say? But let's continue and see along the way where we will deduct points and for what, if it is necessary to do so of course. Regarding the maps on which this event took place, we had 4 at our disposal. Muravanka, Studzianki, Pilsen, and Ruinberg. All these maps have undergone major changes from a visual point of view and the elements placed on them, mostly to create some atmosphere and environment specific to the Halloween period during the event. No changes were made to their basic structure, but the placement of new elements such as house-sized pumpkins, ghosts and other visual effects gave us goosebumps at times, not necessarily always in a good way, and it kind of irritated us at other times, because some elements placed on the maps are positioned completely absurdly and without logic, making it difficult to navigate the map or precisely target an enemy tank. Time and time again we got stuck in certain structures that were masked by giant pumpkins or other graphical elements and effects, making us vulnerable to enemy attack or even dying from it. Other times we could not aim properly due to the fact that our target was obstructed by various elements, having to expose ourselves more than was necessary to be able to aim properly. We are not saying that the maps look bad, on the contrary, they look very cool, but it can get annoying very quickly to play on them, which is not ideal. We understand that these changes bring an atmospheric feeling to the maps and get you in the right mood for Halloween, so we won't deduct a point here. But more care needs to be taken when making such changes so that they don't make playability on these maps more difficult. Apart from that, the map selection was pretty good overall with the exception of the Studs Yankee map, which either generated widespread chaos for both teams or was a camp fest most of the time. Another aspect to discuss here though is the unfortunate map placement of the so-called jack-o'-lantern, which gives the player various super buffs when picked up. The jack-o'-lantern is a thing that appears at certain times on the maps and once taken by a player gives him a super buff, such as Detrimental Jack, which increases damage by 100%, Flaming Jack, setting enemy tanks on fire, Decaying Jack, which destroys enemy suspension and gun, and Rapid Jack, increasing your rate of fire by 50%. This all sounds good, but the bad news is that the possible locations where this jack-o'-lantern can appear are predefined and do not change from game to game, which creates three relatively big problems. The first is that players familiar with the maps know the positions where they might appear and are usually the first to benefit from these super buffs, thus making it very difficult for a less experienced player to be able to pick them up. Moreover, most of the time the players who take them are fixated on this objective and know exactly how to go about it and set up their tanks to their advantage in order to take them first. The second problem is that the team controlling these super buffs gets a major advantage in the battle right from the start, because they have the potential to alter the battle's course in such a way as to swing the round in their favor. Basically, whoever controls them is usually guaranteed an easy and quick victory. Aspect even mentioned by Wargaming in their article dedicated to this event. And the third problem is somewhat related to the first. The predefined positions where this jack-o'-lantern can appear make players follow the same predefined strategy to take them, endlessly. Not diversifying or making the mode more interesting in any way, quite the opposite. Already knowing where they will appear, everyone goes in the same direction trying to collect them. We could say it's fine, but it's actually not. Because it doesn't motivate players to play as a team, but to play against their teammates so they can take it first. Which produces mixed results and often leads to swearing and other offensive words directed at another player on the same team. As a rule of thumb, the game can be fun until you get insulted and bullied by some random guy frustrated that he didn't get the buff first. When this happens, we don't think we can talk about something fun anymore, but about something that makes us feel bad, stressed and angry. This phenomenon has been very common in this game for a long time, the peak being when the game had general chat between teams. And I think you remember what a fabulous time it was, for veterans of the game. For newcomers, suffice it to say that more time was spent in the chat window than playing, and there was chronic pain in looking over the chat window during a fight. It still happens today, but to a lesser extent. An example unfortunately is this event, because although it tried to be fun and enjoyable for everyone, it accidentally produced such situations as well. Largely due to this jack-o'-lantern thing and its placement on the maps. There would have been a very simple way to eliminate such incidents as much as possible during the event, specifically by randomly placing the positions where the jack-o'-lantern appears on the map and not creating predefined positions for it. Thus players no longer had reasons to chase after them, not knowing the exact location where they can appear. It could have spawned anywhere on the map, even near enemy bases, thus addressing the second problem discussed previously. But I have given enough ideas here. Maybe next year they will improve this aspect based on them, who knows. Due to the fact that we do not condone such artificially or accidentally created situations where players' toxicity spills over to others, we will, unfortunately, have to deduct the first point for this event. And frankly, we wouldn't have wanted to do that here, because the basic idea of the jack-o'-lantern is cool and suits the event. We like it and find it interesting and has great potential. But not in its current form, because it inadvertently introduces even more toxicity into a game with an already toxic player base. That's the situation for now unfortunately, and we don't need more of it. Moving on to the next stage in our review, we have the basic mechanics of this event. And here things are quite simple, because the battle format is identical to that of random battles. We have 2 teams of 15 players each, who can enter the battle with tanks between tier 6 and 8. It should be noted here that each tier will play strictly on its own tier, which means that if you play with a tier 6 tank, the battle will be formed only with tier 6 tanks. Usually, because there are exceptions. If the matchmaker fails to make a match within a reasonable time, it can throw you into a multi-tiered battle as a first option. This is not ideal at all, because if you're playing with a tier 6 and you find yourself on tier 8, that fight is definitely completely useless for you. After all, what could you do to a Skoda T56 or an IS3A if you have a rusty T3485? Not much, I suppose, and here we will have more to discuss about the premium tanks, especially the tier 8 ones, because they were, as expected, the favorites for this event. But let's continue with what other options the matchmaker considers, apart from the first option. If it can't do a multi-tiered battle, which is almost impossible since it's the first option applied, only then will consider 10 vs 10, and 7 vs 7 formats for the battle. From our point of view here, things should have been exactly the other way around, and the formats with fewer players should have been considered first, followed by the multi-tiered format. The system they chose and applied has no logic here. At least we can't find one or a good enough excuse. Just that the matchmaker will try to set up a single tier battle is not a good enough excuse in this case. The matchmaker should always, absolutely always do single tier battles, especially since we also have different abilities that equipped on a tier 8 tank will wreak havoc on tier 6. Can you guess what usually happens when a tier 6 drops in a tier 8 fight? After a few failed attempts to do something, they'll just sit around in the spawn points, doing absolutely nothing else, because they wouldn't have anything else to do after all. And we cannot say that these cases were isolated incidents, because we participated in such fights more times than we would have liked. And it's not fun at all, especially since usually such fights where players just give up result in a quick defeat for one of the teams. In a completely idiotic and unfair way for that team, because it's not their fault that the matchmaker dropped them in tier 8. Nothing more or less to say here, except that due to the way the matchmaker was designed to work, we will have to deduct one more point from the final verdict. Sorry, but just trying, and I emphasize trying, to set up a single tier is not good enough. It's like saying, sorry, I was trying not to hit you in the head with a golf club. I tried to hit the ball, but your head seemed easier to hit since it was a bit bigger and looked like a ball.
Headshot.
And with that, we're done here. This topic is starting to irritate me a little already. Let's move on to a similar irritating topic, unfortunately. We were talking earlier about premium tanks, especially tier 8 tanks. Here we have another major problem, you see, because the mode has been polluted by such tanks, as expected I suppose. After all, every player wants to have the most chances to win and collect Halloween points as quickly as possible, which is understandable. The problem isn't necessarily that most, if not all, of the tanks in a battle were premium, but that certain tanks were obscenely abused in various ways that the mode wasn't intended to work. Or at least we assume that's not how it was intended to work, because it breaks the core mechanics of the game. In combination with active or passive abilities, and last but not least, the super buffs given by Jack-o'-lantern, some tanks like KV-5 or E75TS become monstrosities of mass destruction. And this is just a small selection of premium tanks, some of the most abused and frequently encountered by us during tier 8 games. When you meet such a tank with the perfect combination of applied abilities, you have nowhere to run or hide. Believe me, we have had many such games where we have encountered such situations. There's nothing you can do in these cases, seriously. You just die and respawn some more, and so on. Until the round ends. For example, let's take a KV-5 equipped with turbocharger, additional grousers, improved hardening and a driver who has controlled impact skill. To these, we add some active and passive abilities, such as dash, which increases engine power and top speed, Hulk, to get another 25% boost in HP, and enchanted armor, which increases ramming damage and protects you from taking any damage back. The result of this setup, you might wonder. You turn a heavy tank into a heavy missile that at the slightest touch kills everything around it. If you also take Flaming Jack, which sets the enemy vehicle on fire, or Detrimental Jack, which increases damage dealt by 100%, you have a machine of mass destruction under your control. This is just one example of a tank and possible configurations that completely mess up the core mechanics of the game. There are multiple other combos and tanks that can do this, as I think you can imagine when you have such an arsenal of abilities and possible setups. We really don't think that's how this system was intended to work here. Clearly it is busted beyond repair. Or, maybe that was the intended way for this system to work. Who the frack knows anymore? In this case, it was thought out so severely poorly that it raises significant questions about the future of this wonderfully broken game. There's no denying that it can be fun when you're behind the wheel of such a tank, wreaking havoc among enemy team. But it sure isn't any fun for those on the other side. And if you don't have a premium tank to properly equip and configure to join in on the fun, you're kind of on the sidelines. You have to settle for trying to do what you can with what you have in your garage, thus slowing down your progress through the stages and making the mode less fun and attractive for you. We believe that this should be valid for everyone, attractive and fun, that is, regardless of what tanks you have in your garage. Even Wargaming says so, on their website dedicated to the event, where they present this new mode as light-hearted and fun. But it seems that the fun part doesn't apply to everyone, unfortunately. Being a new event, some aspects were probably not well thought out and set up properly. We can understand that somewhat. But, no matter from which point you look or try to approach this problem, we reach the same conclusion. That the core mechanics are a bit poorly thought out here. Which will cause one more point to be deducted from the final score. The basic idea and how this whole system is supposed to work is good in principle, but it still needs a little refinement here and there. We just hope they keep working on improving these aspects if it comes back next year, because overall we think it's a cool event that has potential. and at least it doesn't generate as much hysteria and drama as Murney 13 did. Moving forward a little but still staying on this topic somewhat, because it is related to the way the event works. We have reached the conditions necessary to win the games. After all, that's the basic objective, isn't it? There are actually multiple ways to do this. 2 in number to be precise. The first method is by capturing bases, because each map now has 2 bases. But they must both be captured to win the game this way. Easier said than done, because most of the time you'll lose control of one of them. It depends on how well balanced the teams actually are. If both teams are somewhat decent, the chances of winning the game on the bases are slim. If a team is significantly better and has more skilled players, it's relatively easy and you're back in the garage pretty quickly, boasting absolute success over the enemy team, or try to sweeten your bitterness with some pumpkin juice, if you're on the losing side. The second method to win is through damage. And it can't be simpler than that. If neither team manages to capture and control the 2 bases until the end of the game, the team that did the most damage wins. And here we could talk again about the premium tanks and the abilities available, and the jack-o'-lantern, and how all this stuff doesn't work the way it should work. But we won't, because we've already discussed it and it's making me grow white hairs. So let's continue. These are the 2 ways games can be won, and generally, from our observations, most games are won by damage. Why does this usually happen, you may ask? There is a simple answer. Because teams fight valiantly to do damage. As much damage as possible. There's no point in messing around with bases when you have premium tanks and abilities that magically turn your tank into a Godzilla or an F-15 Eagle, cruising at Mach 2.5 on the battlefield. So the bases are just used as meeting points by the 2 teams so they can hang out, nothing more or less. Hang out and beat the crap out of each other, of course. In the end, someone has to win the game. Now if I were to think of a percentage of games won or lost on the bases, I think it's somewhere under 20%, which makes it clear how you have to go about winning. Just do as much damage as you can and you're good to go. And this is something that will actually help you finish the missions during the stages in a shorter time too. Because the Halloween points needed for the first mission are calculated based on your ranking position at the end of the battle, and the second mission requires you to qualify in the top 7 players on the team. Guess how you do this in the fastest way? Exactly as you think. Damage. The more you have, the better your ranking position. And the sooner you realize this is the key to success, the better. Because it's a waste of time trying to capture a base, and you won't get much out of it either. On the contrary, you will die very often trying to do this and you will end up in the bottom half of the leaderboard at the end. So what's the point? Simply put, there is none. We tried to find one, honestly, but we couldn't. So we did what others were doing with great success. We joined the damage team. Because it just doesn't make sense to try to capture a base by yourself and avoid getting hit, which resets your cap points by the way, only to end up being destroyed, unable to do maybe even a single damage to another enemy tank in the process. Since all missions and progress through the stages were strictly based on your performance of doing as much damage as possible to rank up as high as possible, what's the point of bases anymore? Well, there isn't one, to be frank, or it got lost along the way. We can't find a good enough reason for their existence, to be honest, just that they were used as rendezvous points. In a broken and meaningless way, I suppose that could be a reason to justify their presence somehow. So okay, we'll have to settle for that. But regardless of their usefulness, regardless of how we look at things, we can't find much properly applied logic here either. We do not dispute that we have 2 methods of winning at our disposal. They do exist and sometimes work, in their own more or less logical ways. What we are debating, however, is their utility and whether or not there was a need for them. Because the way things look now, It just looks like they scribbled and threw something on paper quickly, just to get it over with. And that's actually what they seem to have done here. Let me explain. The root of the problem is actually the lack of motivation for players to use both methods of winning the game, that is, because as we said, on paper there really were two. If there was something to motivate the players to do that, then things could have been completely different in many ways. Some that would have solved a good part of the problems discovered by us so far. And somehow again we find ourselves in the situation of having to come up with ideas that would have had the potential to fix these problems, it seems. To make bases less pointless and justify their existence as more than just a simple rendezvous point on maps, capturing them could have given a more consistent XP bonus to players who helped capture them. A much more consistent bonus, since ranking is calculated exactly how it's done in random battles, which makes damage king. You do a lot of damage and kills, your place is assured in the upper half of the ranking. Are you staying to capture the base? What a bummer. You won't get much XP for that, and your place is assured in the very bottom half of the leaderboard. Can you see where the problem is now? Exactly here. Pumpkin Bash is based on the same calculation method used in random battles, which rewards players primarily based on the number of disasters they manage to make on the battlefield, and after that, a little bonus experience is awarded for capturing the enemy base. That's why you don't see many players in random battles trying to capture the base, except in exceptional situations when called for. But this isn't random battles, it's Pumpkin Bash, and we've got 2 damn bases to capture. If you planted 2 bases for us to capture, you could have changed the bonus for capturing them as well, so that they are worth capturing and the players who made the effort to do so are rewarded with a better position in the leaderboard. That's one idea, but we have one more. We seem to be a fountain of ideas today, for better or for worse. Suppose there was a 3rd mission per stage where the completion condition was winning a game by capturing both bases. Just one game, nothing more complicated to do. The reward for this mission could have been, say, a day of premium, nothing special in the end, but it would have motivated players, especially those who don't have a premium account, to participate in the event and have a good enough reason to try to capture the bases. Thus the players would have received a small gift of 5 premium days. It would have been one of the necessary conditions for completing the stages, and last but not least, it would have made the bases less useless. These 2 ideas could have been applied in parallel, the first increasing the XP bonus for contributing to the capture of bases and the second incentivizing their capture. We are sure that 5 days of premium would not have been such a big financial disaster for Wargaming, and would have even been a small bonus for the players who participated in the event. And last but not least, it would have had the potential to improve the moat, because players would no longer be entirely focused on doing as much damage as possible, which would have solved a good part of the problems reported previously and for which we deducted points from the final verdict. We find it hard to believe that the army of people that this company has at its disposal could not have come up with such proposals or ideas. It's more like they didn't think too much about the mechanics of this event. An aspect that stands out immediately, starting with the fact that Halloween points are calculated on the same rules as the amount of XP in random battles, and by the fact that this event seems to have been made and thought out in a relatively short period of time, as a kind of desperate backup plan, because a lot of things don't connect properly and don't have much logic in the way they work. Due to these aspects, there is nothing left for us to do here but to deduct 1 more point from the final verdict. Unfortunately, but fairly in the end. We don't like getting half-baked stuff when this game has already been suffering from it for a long time. That just adds more problems and suffering to the game and doesn't actually solve anything. Don't get us wrong here, the basic idea they had for this event is a good one, and it was definitely a more enjoyable experience than last year's May 13. And we really hope to see Pumpkin Bash again, but in a more coherent and refined form. That's all we want and what this game really needs to get better and be able to leave behind its less useful and archaic stuff and mechanics. Because the root of the problems is often outdated mechanisms that still linger in an advanced form of putrefaction. That said, we're nearing the end of our honest review of this event, and we've got a few more things to highlight here before we give our final verdict. Some more important than others, but they are worth mentioning. The event integrates the same unlimited respawn system that we encountered a month ago in the Waff & Rager Legacy mode, and comes with the same problems and drawbacks. More specifically, it promotes a reckless playstyle where players are encouraged to throw themselves into the flames of hell, thinking that no problem, they'll just respawn back and start over. The only difference is that here it's called Resurrection, probably to give a more Halloween vibe to it. But regardless of its name, all this system manages to do is just generate a chaotic playstyle and make players engage in more or less appropriate actions. As for Jack-o'-lantern, besides the various super buffs it gives, it also restores and increases your tank's HP when it's taken, but there's a catch to it. As long as you are in possession of a super buff, your tank will be permanently visible to enemies wherever you are. The only way to get rid of it, if that's what you want, is to be destroyed. In which case your super buff is automatically transferred to the player who destroyed your tank, benefiting from it. But usually, you probably don't want to do that, get destroyed while you have a super buff I mean. In the end, I suppose it doesn't really matter. We have unlimited resurrections, don't we? So you can die as many times as you like and do what you want. What you care about is doing as much damage as possible, because that will ultimately secure you a place on the podium. It's also worth mentioning that the ammo is infinite and free, regardless of the type of ammo used. Basically, so-called premium ammo is at everyone's discretion to use as they wish and as much as they wish. That's nice, so we have nothing to complain about here. We admit that in most games we put premium ammo in the barrel, with few exceptions where we forgot to select it or confused the keys. Because the keys were changed during the event. The normal ammo keys 1, 2, and 3 were assigned to combat abilities, while ammo selection was assigned to the 7, 8, and 9 keys. Fortunately, regular consumables remained assigned to the usual keys, but relocating ammo gave us a bit of a headache until we got used to it. And it left us a little confused for a while, we might say. Because when we wanted to participate in random battles, we tended to press the 7, 8, and 9 keys for ammo selection, which is not ideal, I suppose. Perhaps this relocation of the keys was not a very well thought out idea in the end, but we managed to get through it and make a full recovery, thank God. The last thing left, I suppose, are the commemorative medals, because as we are well used to, they cannot be missing from any event or occasion. This time we have 2 medals to collect, the first being the Spooky Adventure, which can be earned by completing all 5 stages, and the second is the Grim Reaper, which can be obtained by earning 65,000 Halloween points during the event. In addition, we also have a new special badge to remind us of the Pumpkin Bash mode, which is also obtained by completing the 5 progression stages. New badges are always welcome, as that would be the only aspect of the game where we don't have enough at the moment. They're kind of a rare convenience, you might say. But we are sure that this gap will be filled along the way, just like with the medals. Over time we will accumulate hundreds or thousands of such badges. And that's about it, I suppose. We have completed our secret mission to smash as many pumpkins as possible and make some sweet juice out of them. But something seems to be missing, doesn't it? We haven't yet discussed the various bundles that were available during the event on which you could have burned your money in gold, if you wanted to do so. There is a simple explanation for this actually. Because none of the bundles would have been worth your hard-earned money, there is no more honest answer than that. Perhaps some of them would have been worth it, or rather we would have been somewhat forced to resort to them. But fortunately, there was no need for such drastic financial measures. Largely due to the 8 qualifications per stage that were required at the beginning, and later simplified. If the required number of qualifications had not been reduced, we would certainly be talking in different terms here and would have reason to reduce more points from the final verdict. Because many players wouldn't have been able to qualify by the time the stage ended, and would have been put in a position to choose whether to invest money to buy the crew member they couldn't get by playing, or just skip it. But by simplifying the mission and reducing the required number of qualifications to 3, the day was saved. And the honest truth is they made the right choice here, and we hope that this trend will continue. It's a good one that is definitely beneficial to the game and the community in general. They may not have made as much profit from this event as they had planned, but it was for a good cause in the end. That of making the event more fun, accessible and stress-free. Which can only make us happy. While we discussed these bundles and why they won't be part of our honest review, we highlighted a few of them on your screens, as I think you've noticed. But please note we will not go into detail on this subject, nor develop it further than what has been said so far. Because if we do that, the final verdict may change. Which we don't need to do in this case. So the last thing to do here is to give our final verdict. And you should already know the verdict if you've been paying close attention to the points deducted so far. But don't worry, we will display it on the screen as usual. 6 is the final verdict given in our honest review of this splendid and fabulous event, but imperfect, incomplete and held back by outdated core game mechanics and last but not least, undercooked decisions and ideas. It is neither good nor bad, we could say. It's actually above average after all. And we're sure that if this event sees the light of day again and is cooked up a bit better, it has quite a lot of potential to become a favorite. Because in the end, we were left with a generally pleasant impression, and Pumpkin Bash can be fun and engaging when all the elements work right. When these elements do not work, however, the event quickly turns into generalized chaos from which no one really escapes. All players are swept along whether they want to or not. Which can sometimes be fun too, for a limited time though. After the boiling point, it becomes irritating, disappointing and annoying. Which is not preferable. With these last words, our review has finally come to an end. With a somewhat positive verdict, we could say, because we can rarely give more than 4 or 5 points for an event released by Wargaming, which is a great success in this case. That being said, Holiday Ops 2023 is upon us and you can definitely expect another honest review from us. This is probably the most awaited and important event of the year and we cannot miss such a special occasion. Only maybe if they cancel it midway, which we hope doesn't happen. Until then, take care of yourselves and your pumpkins, give a like if you enjoy our content, a dislike if you don't and tell us your opinion about this event and the final verdict in the comments section down below. Rest assured that we read them all and enjoy hearing from you. Stay healthy, stay strong, and see you next time. This is our recommendation for you, as usual.